Thank you. Dear friends, good morning or good evening or good afternoon, I don't know. Although our time seems to be an affirmation of the widely known adage, so many men, so many opinions, where everyone holds their own opinion for truth, we still dare to assert that there is only one truth. Everybody may have their own little truth, but there can only be one absolute truth, a lasting truth that applies to all that exists and is applicable in all circumstances and at all times. If you think for a moment, you can see the logic of this. For there cannot be two truths, for if there were, one would contradict the other, making one of those truths an untruth. So that is not possible. However, note that we are speaking of truth written in capital letters. That truth is the reality, the essence, the true nature of things, the essence of life itself. In fact, that truth is the boundlessness, the very deepest background of all that exists, nothing excepted. We will dwell on this truth in more detail later, but for now we can say that if the boundless is the background of all that exists, then our sensory world, so the world we see, hear and feel, is one aspect of it, and that behind this outer world, an outer world for us, are countless other worlds. In this context, we often speak of spiritual realms or worlds, thus referring to areas, a certain reality, of which the outer world is a reflection. This is very important to realize, because although there is a boundless, all-encompassing truth or reality, the all, you can call it, there are countless more limited truths. And these smaller truths, or partial truths, are therefore not untrue in themselves, but they are relative. They are in a relation to larger and smaller truths. That is often the difficulty for us humans. We still lack the somewhat broader view to see that such a smaller truth is a part of something larger. For example, look at this dot. If you describe that dot for yourself, you determine for yourself the color and the shape, and we assume that it will be a more or less adequate description of it. But if we zoom out a little, then you see something quite different. And if you now have to give a description of that dot, it will probably be different. You will see that it is an earring. In any case, you will describe the dot as part of a larger picture. And if you take another step back figuratively, you will see that this larger whole belongs to a painting. And if you look behind that again, you will know that this painting is a reflection of an even larger reality, experienced and represented by the painter. So that dot is a part of the painting. That painting is a reflection of a reality that the painter was able to shape. And that reality, however, is nothing more than a mere facet of an even greater reality. And in this light you can speak of partial truths within partial truths. Take us humans as an example. Our reality or truth is the city we live in, a city which is part of a country which is part of a continent, part of the planet Earth, which in turn is part of our solar system. And therefore you can say that for us, human beings on this planet, the greater reality is the solar system. And when we speak of the solar system, we do not mean only the visible sun and the planets, to which we send missiles so that we can learn something about them, but we are referring especially to all those other worlds that have the sun as the source, as the core. We are referring to a wide range of worlds that are not perceptible to us, just as is the case with the human being itself, because the human being too is composed of different aspects. In the next lecture, this will be discussed in more detail. Well, let's take another step back. And lo and behold, the sun is nothing but a dot in a cosmic painting we call the Milky Way, and even greater truth. And our story is getting monotonous because when we take one or a few more steps backward, for example with the recently launched James Webb Space Telescope, and we see that there are billions and billions of Milky Ways or galaxies, and we cannot look any further. But isn't it obvious that even all those galaxies are nothing more than a dot in an even larger painting? And if we look at the small world of cells and atoms and elementary particles, we can tell exactly the same story, only now in the opposite direction. A cell consists of molecules, and those of atoms, and those of smaller particles. Is there a limit here? Say it for yourself. Let your intuition speak for itself. So towards the great and towards the small, inward and outward, nowhere do we encounter a limit. Is not then the truth of which we have just spoken, that incomprehensible boundlessness and infinity in all respects, in duration, in extent? It is beyond any human comprehension and therefore does not depend on human perception. In the 2020 Symposium, The Theory of Everything, we have dwelt at length on this. And we recommend that you read or reread the Lucifer, the Lightbringer, in which we report on this symposium. It also describes that all those worlds, small or large, are expressions of living beings. And the truth could therefore be called the boundless life itself. Not one life, but the source, the essence of every living being that exists in infinity. This boundless truth is beyond our comprehension, but do not draw premature conclusions from it, for we can indeed understand its basic idea and take it into account in our lives. A first and very important conclusion we can draw from this is that there is an essential unity, since everything is part of that boundless life. Of course, in our outer world we see great differences between, for example, plants and animals and humans, and between humans themselves. And fortunately enough, those differences are there. It would be a dull lot if they weren't there. However, those differences are not essential. They are temporary, because every being, from atom to star, is a part of the boundlessness. A part of the boundlessness is the same as the boundlessness, for there is no such thing as a bit of boundlessness. The boundlessness is thus our common primal ground, the essential unity which underlies everything. The second, related conclusion is that universal brotherhood is a fact. And by the word brother, we do not refer to a human being of the male sex, but to the fact that all beings emanate from the metaphorical parent, the same source. Or even better, the same lifeblood, the same living energy, the same consciousness, and you see, we are searching for words to paint this lovely picture. The same life flows through all of us. In fact, we are parts of each other. And with these conclusions, the abstract idea of truth suddenly becomes a lot more tangible, a lot more concrete. If you live according to that truth, and you look deep into the eyes of a fellow human being, or deep into the heart of a flower, or you see in a dark night the beauty of the stars, then you see yourself. You see yourself reflected in the other, and the other reflects in you. Would you ever want to harm your brother if you realize this? Or would this realization actually encourage you to support, to help, to inspire others? I would say, answer for yourself. Again, let your intuition speak. Now you may rightly ask, if there is only one truth, then what are these smaller truths? We actually gave the answer already when we use the word reflection. Each partial truth is a limited reflection, a restricted mirroring of the boundless. That reflection is not random, not coincidental. Certainly it is not. There is order, there is lawfulness in the cosmos, there are fixed patterns, as we shall make clear in a moment. Even if we are talking about cosmic units such as suns and galaxies, for us incomprehensible large, still there is a partial truth here, a dot on an even much larger painting, and therefore limitation. Partial truths are therefore always in line with other and greater truths. When we discover a greater truth, we do not degrade a partial truth to being untrue, but then we see the limitation. To explain this, using the well-known example of the blind ones and the elephant, we can say that each blind man who touches a part of the elephant and gives a description of it has a part of the truth. That part is not in conflict with the other part or with other parts. No, it complements it. And together they make the picture a little bit more complete. And in all this you must be well aware that every truth, great or small, does not result from mechanical processes. After all, because everything is part of boundless life, every phenomenon, everything that exists is a living entity. There is an endless hierarchy of consciousness, and that means that there is an aggregate of living beings, a brilliant cooperation between all the dots in the figurative painting. There is one core, the top, the most evolved being, and further, there are beings on different levels of development, and each of them lives on one of the layers of that hierarchy. But because all those beings have the top as their core, the heart of their heart, there is a fundamental equality. So even though a being is very much undeveloped, it has the same potentials as the core of that hierarchy. And if you consider that hierarchy again as a limited reflection of the boundlessness, and each being in that hierarchy as a limited expression of the top of that hierarchy, and each being itself is also a hierarchy, then you get a picture of what the structure of nature is like. And between all those beings, there is a wonderful cooperation, with the more advanced beings inspiring the less advanced, and the less advanced beings functioning as vehicles, instruments for the more advanced beings. And does this sound abstract to you? Well, look at your body. Don't you cooperate with the trillions of cells and the trillions and trillions of atoms that make up your body? In the same way, exactly the same way, the consciousness of the sun works with us. There is a mutual dependence. We cannot live without each other. So, the universal patterns we see in this collaboration are not mechanical processes, but the consequences of actions and reactions of those living beings. Some of these patterns we can recognize, sometimes easily, sometimes with some effort. Think of cyclicity, cause and effect, and the growth of each being. And because all those partial truths are part of the larger, boundless truth, they can never contradict each other unless you absolutize a partial truth and, elaborating on the metaphor of the blind and the elephant, you claim by all means that an elephant is a fan when you cut hold of its ear, and consider your truth to be opposite of that of someone who describes the elephant as a snake, because he has touched the trunk. At our last symposium, we discussed the 7 jewels of wisdom, 7 universal patterns. Each jewel in itself is a partial truth, which never contradicts to other jewels. On the contrary, it is by considering them with each other that your vision of the truth grows. Now you may wonder, and if you do so, that means that you are already spiritually awakened, at least to some extent. You may wonder why so many people do not see this greater truth. We are a part of it, after all. Because if more people experience this truth and lived accordingly, there would be no strife, no war, no inequality, no hatred, and no envy today. The answer to this important question lies in a psychological phenomenon called objective idealism. What is it? Let us first explain it using the metaphor of the dot and the painting. If you focus your consciousness on that dot, because you see nothing else, and you think of that dot as the only reality, then you are forming an image of what you perceive with your thoughts. Your perception is limited, and the ideas about that limited perceptions cause you to call that dot the truth, although it is at best a partial truth. The classic example from the Hindu tradition to explain objective idealism is the story of a man who comes home at twilight and is startled because he thinks he sees a snake. On closer observation, however, it turns out not to be a snake, but a coiled piece of rope. Yet, his fear of that supposed snake was just as real to him as if it had been a real snake. So you make your own truth. You experience something as true when you are perceiving consciousness assigns reality to it. Your mind is in fact subject to illusion, making a false picture of what you perceive. So the answer to why we don't see a greater truth is that our thinking misinterprets our limited perception. And this is not just true in the case of that dot in the painting or the rope in which we see a snake. How many people see themselves as nothing more than their bodies? And don't many say that outside the external world there's nothing, like what I don't see doesn't exist? And even though there are many indications that there must be more, what are the laws of nature, for example? We often limit our idea of truth to our sensory world. Now, our limited ability to perceive does not have to be an insurmountable obstacle to seeing more of that greater truth, but then we must recognize that we know at most a part of the truth. So we must dare to discuss our own partial truth. And that means daring to talk about it and sincerely listening to what others think about it and what they perceive as truth. And if we don't do that, we are like a blind one touching a part of the elephant and thinking we know the whole animal. In short, being aware of your own imperfection in discovering what truth is a condition for finding more truth. And that is the weakness of many today. Because everywhere we see that the small partial truth is being inflated into the only truth. And if someone tells you that you are dealing with a dot and not with the whole painting, or with a piece of rope instead of a snake, you are ridiculed, you are not believed, and in the worst case, they even want to lock you up or kill you. And don't think we are exaggerating. How many people in the past have been persecuted? And how often is it still the case today? Just because they had a different view of things. And another example. Go talk to somebody who strongly believes in a conspiracy. There is no evidence, and it is devoid of any logic. Yet the conspiracy thinker attributes reality to his delusion, and thus creates his truth, although all the facts show that this is not the case. And don't think conspiracy thinkers are entirely distinct from the rest. Perhaps they are more extreme in their views, but many people limit their truth to a particular idea, a particular thought just as much. Does it demonstrate the same mentality when a psychologist says that consciousness is in the brain and that free will does not exist? Period. No discussion possible. Or when a geneticist says that your character is in your DNA and dismisses all evidence that this is not so as nonsense. Or when an economist assumes that in a healthy society there must be economic growth and that the market will solve all our problems. Or the nationalist who swears by all that is holy that their nation is different and better than other nations. Or the adherent of a religion who knows exactly what God wants from us, and those who don't believe that should be punished. It is the same mentality. When you don't question your own vision, when you aren't open to a larger vision, dogmatism and rigidity arise, and the seeing of any truth whatsoever is lost. In all these cases, we will have to step back so that we get a larger field of view. How to do that will be discussed in detail in the next lecture, after which we can discuss it further with each other in the workshop. We would like to conclude this contribution with the hopeful thought that we can at least take that step back. That's always possible, because all of nature is a great learning school divided into smaller learning schools, which we go through from small to large. There are already humans who are much further along in this learning process than we are. They have preceded us in exploring and revealing truth. These great ones, our teachers, tell us as much about it as our understanding can comprehend. They inspire us to develop our faculties, with which we can get to know and understand more and more of the boundless truth. And the fact that they can do this is because they have already developed these abilities within themselves. Abilities that every human being has within them, but which are still dormant or sleeping or latent in most of us. This is an essential thought, a very essential thought to hold as we delve deeper into how to find that greater truth in the next lecture. For every human being, without exception, is capable of this. For we are all part of that boundless truth. We are that truth in essence. And therefore, we also have the qualities, the tools and abilities within us to understand the essence of that great truth. So the only difference between us and those great teachers is that they have developed more of their limitless faculties than we have. They have been able to penetrate further behind the outer reality and build a deeper understanding of the inextricable interconnectedness of all that exists. They live in the awareness of the essential unity underlying all of nature, visible and invisible. We too can develop that awareness. We have the abilities to do so. Thank you for your attention.